In 1993, parents hated it. News channels feared it. Politicians blamed it for violence. And now, the soundtrack to Doom has officially been added to the National Recording Registry inside the Library of Congress, alongside legendary music connected to Beyoncé, Taylor Swift, and Weezer. Yeah, a demon-shooting video game soundtrack is now considered culturally historic. And honestly, no one in the 1990s would have believed this. Because back then, Doom wasn't seen as art. It was seen as dangerous. The game was violent, chaotic, and controversial. Schools tried to block it. Parents panicked over it. Critics called it toxic. But hidden underneath all the blood and explosions was something unforgettable. The music, heavy, aggressive, fast. It sounded less like a video game soundtrack, and more like a metal concert trapped inside a computer. And that's exactly why it changed gaming forever. Cut to old PC footage. Back in the early 1990s, most video game music sounded simple and cartoonish. Technology was limited. Audio quality was rough. But inside a small Texas studio called ID Software, a group of young developers wanted to create something nobody had heard before. At the center of it all were John Carmack and John Romero. These guys weren't trying to make a cute arcade game. They wanted players to feel adrenaline, fear, intensity. And to make that work, they needed music that felt alive. That responsibility went to composer Bobby Prince. Now here's the crazy part. Computers back then couldn't properly handle real heavy metal audio. Storage space was tiny. Sound cards were inconsistent. So Prince had to create the illusion of heavy metal using MIDI technology. And somehow, he pulled it off. The soundtrack drew inspiration from bands like Metallica and Pantera. The result? Pure chaos. When players launched Doom for the first time in December 1993, they instantly felt it. The pounding rhythms, the dark atmosphere, the sense that something terrifying was waiting around every corner. And suddenly video games felt different. More mature, more cinematic, more dangerous. But what happened next changed everything. Doom exploded across the world. People copied the game onto floppy disks and shared it like forbidden treasure. College computer labs became obsessed with it. Teenagers stayed awake all night playing it. And the soundtrack became part of gaming culture forever. Even people who never finished the game remembered the music. Because it didn't just play in the background. It pushed the action forward. It made players feel unstoppable. And over time that soundtrack started influencing everything. Action games, shooter games, trailer music, internet culture. Even modern game composers still reference Doom's energy today. But despite all that influence, mainstream institutions still didn't take video game music seriously. For decades, many people saw game soundtracks as disposable, temporary, not real music. And that's what makes this story so unbelievable. Because over 30 years later, the Library of Congress officially recognized Doom's soundtrack as culturally significant. That's a massive deal. The National Recording Registry exists to preserve recordings that shaped American culture and history. We're talking about iconic music, historic speeches, and legendary albums. And now Doom is part of that archive forever. Think about how insane that is. A soundtrack once criticized for corrupting kids is now protected as national cultural history. Nobody saw that coming. And honestly, this moment is bigger than just Doom. It represents something much larger. For years, video games were treated like childish entertainment. Now, they're one of the biggest cultural forces on Earth. Modern gaming generates more money than movies and music combined. Universities teach game design. Museums hold gaming exhibitions. And entire generations grew up emotionally connected to game soundtracks. For many people, these songs are tied directly to childhood memories. Late-night gaming sessions, best friends, summer vacations, escaping stress. That emotional connection is real. And the people who grew up with games are now adults running companies, media outlets, and cultural institutions. So in many ways, this recognition was inevitable. The world finally caught up. But maybe the most emotional part of the story is what it means for older gamers. People who got mocked for loving games in the 90s. People who were told gaming was a waste of time. Now the very thing they loved is officially recognized as culturally important. That validation hits hard. Because preserving a soundtrack also preserves memories. Preserves an era. Feeling. A generation. And Doom's soundtrack represents rebellion better than almost anything else from the early internet age. It was loud. Aggressive. Unapologetic. It didn't ask for permission. Just arrived. And changed everything. And somehow, decades later, it's still alive. New players continue discovering Doom every single year. The soundtrack still sounds intense. Still sounds dangerous. Still sounds powerful. Most media fades with time. Doom refused to. And maybe that's the real reason it earned its place in the Library of Congress. Not because it was safe. Not because it was respectable. But because it changed culture forever. Slow music begins. Back in 1993, nobody imagined that a violent demon shooting game would one day be treated like historical art. But history has a funny way of surprising people. Sometimes the things adults fear the most become the things future generations protect forever. And somewhere tonight, someone is hearing the Doom soundtrack for the very first time. And feeling that same adrenaline players felt over 30 years ago.